I caught my lawyer brother plotting to sell our 40-year-old family orchard, so I exposed his scheme. You won't believe what happened next. My name is Emily, and I was raised up at Sunrise Apples on our family apple orchard located in the picturesque rolling hills of Washington state. Our orchard has been in my family for 40 years. My folks, Robert and Linda, have operated this orchard since the year they married, 1983. They both grew up in farm families and always wanted to have some land of their own to grow on. I have an older brother, Jake, 35M, who never really got into life on the farm. Right from when we were kids, our personalities and interests were chalk and cheese. I was the one running after Dad in the orchard, asking him countless questions about how to prune trees and how many varieties of apples we have. Jake, on the other hand, liked to stay indoors with his nose buried in books about faraway places and exciting careers. Growing up, Jake always talked about moving to the big city and becoming a hotshot lawyer. He'd complain endlessly about the early mornings, the physical labor, and how mind-numbingly boring small-town life was. I remember one when he was 16 and I was 13. It was harvest time, and everybody had to work. Jake was put out to pick, but he just would not settle to it. Kept knocking out his phone to check it, grumbling he was missing some party in town. Dad finally lost it and blew up at Jake, telling him to either do his share of the work or get out. Jake stormed off, and later I found him sitting by the creek that runs through our property. He was scribbling furiously in a notebook, and when I asked him what he was doing, he showed me a list of law schools he wanted to apply to. "I'm getting out of here, he said. This place is sucking the life out of me." While I loved everything about the orchard, autumnal apple fragrance, satisfaction at the success of this year's harvest, and the company of other local farmers somehow just felt right. I loved helping Mom in the farm stand, chatting with regulars who'd been buying our apples for years. I even liked the hard work of pruning in winter, the agony of cutting out the branches of trees, then to see their bare branches and what bounty they would bring in their time. While Jake set off for Seattle to become a lawyer, I pulled down the fort at home and graduated with a degree in agriculture from the local community college. I was working on the orchard full-time, learning everything I could from my parents. Dad taught me about soil management and pest control, while Mom showed me the business side of things, accounting, marketing, and customer relations. While he did visit less and less, always with an excuse that he was too busy studying or doing an internship, when he came home, it seemed like a stranger again. He would speak of fancy internships in huge law firms, of parties he had attended, and of people of high repute whom he was meeting. As if he wanted to impress us with something that would only drive us further apart. It was during that time that I met my husband, Tom. He was a new teacher in the local high school and became one of the visiting groups with his kids. The initial day we met, we started bonding over the love of outdoors and small-town living. Before long, he became a part of the family, learning the ins and outs of the orchard business and pitching in when the busy seasons arrived. 5 years ago this coming summer, our dad took ill, an apparent mild heart attack that luckily did not have any long-term consequences. All the same, the event served as a wake-up call for us all. I can still recall sitting in the waiting room of the hospital, fearing that we'd lose Dad. Jake had flown in from Seattle, looking ruffled and almost out of character with his very expensive suit. After Dad got better, Mom and Dad started talking about retirement and what to do with the orchard. I assumed it was going to go to me because I had been working there my entire life, but then suddenly, Jake took a growing interest in the family business. It seemed to come out of nowhere. He visited more often, became more inquisitive about the orchard's finances, and even came in to help with the harvest. Maybe Jake had finally come around and we could be a pair of orchard partners. And, shoot, I had daydreams of the kids growing up on the farm, cousins as close as Tom and I had been with our cousins from the neighboring farms. Something rang false, though. He was far more interested in the financial statements than the orchard's activities. He'd note how we could optimize things or streamline operations. The guy spewed business jargon that sounded wrong coming from around the apple trees. Last Thanksgiving, our parents had the whole family gather around to present their retirement plan. I thought surely they meant for Jake and me to divide the orchard between us, and we'd run it jointly. I didn't quite believe it, but for the sake of family relations, I'd give it a try. And I remembered how close Jake and I had been as kids, before the farm started to come between us, and I hoped we could get some of that back. Over the next few months, Jake began pushing for changes that could be anything from modernization of operations, to expansion into hard cider production, to even talk of selling off part of the land for a housing development. I resisted, saying we should stick to what we knew and what had worked for nearly 100 years. Tom tried to be a peacemaker by suggesting compromising solutions, but Jake always seemed to have a counterargument at the ready. Things were at their head last month when I was in the barn repairing some stuff on an equipment and heard Jake talking on the phone. At first, I didn't really pay a lot of attention until he said something about forcing her out and full control of the assets. Then I realized he was talking about me in the orchard. My heart started to race. I could feel my blood run cold as Jake related how, by some legal legerdemain, he proposed to end up with full control of the orchard and then turn right around and sell it to some gigantic farming concern for a gigantic profit. He was laughing how easy it would be for him to outmaneuver me since I did not know the first thing about real business. I was devastated. This was more than just a business, this was my home, my heritage, my blood, my entire life. I went to him right away, and my hands just couldn't stay from shaking when I told him what I'd overheard. He tried to deny it at first, but when I pressed him, quoting his own words back at him, he admitted to his plan. He called it wasted potential from the orchard and said that I was too sentimental about the economic opportunity. We ended up fighting with each other like a pair of teenagers, screaming to the hilt. I told him I'd never let him destroy our family's legacy. I was so furious and hurt that right there, I summoned a family meeting. Our parents, Jake's 33 wife Sarah and Tom were all there. As my eyes started to well up, I lamented about the plan to everyone, showing them my notes on his telephone call and all the research on the company he wanted to sell to. Our parents were shocked and livid. Mom started bawling, asking Jake how he could do this to his family. Dad's face was drawn and pasty, looking older than he ever had. Jake started in with the explaining that he was just exploring options for the orchard's future. But it was clear to all of us that he had laid plans to build this kind of double cross for months, maybe years. Sarah had unconcealed shock written all over her face. If truth be spoken, she had barely been married to Jake for 2 years, and I could guess that amidst all this, she might be the one left completely clueless. She kept glancing at Jake and then toward us, perhaps trying to figure out who this man was that she had married who had snuggled in here. The reaction was severe. Our parents instantly canceled their retirement plan and announced that they would be operating the orchard themselves this season. They informed Jake that he was not welcome to continue with the business. Sarah stormed out of the house crying. Jake went after her, still attempting to explain himself. And now, a month later, the family is in uproar. Jake and Sarah have instigated divorce proceedings. Our parents barely speak to Jake. The orchard somehow feels spoiled, an evil spell that affects the very land on which all, literally, of it was built. And even though I did what was best by telling his intention, I can't help but feel guilt as I was the cause of breaking that family apart. And I lie awake at night, remembering the best times we used to have as kids, Jake teaching me how to ride a bike, the two of us building a treehouse in the old oak by the creek. How did we come to this? Tom has been my rock through all of this. He tells me that I didn't cause this situation, Jake did with his greed and dishonesty. But it's hard not to wonder if there was something I could have done differently. Could I have seen this coming? Should I have tried harder to involve Jake in the orchard over the years? It is back to orchard work as usual. The apples take no notice of family drama, pruning and spraying go on as usual. In many ways it is a relief to lose oneself in familiar rhythms of work. Every now and then I look up at the house, half expecting Jake to come pouring out to help like he did when we were kids. So, Reddit, Ida for blowing the whistle on my brother's scheme, even though it's destroyed our family? Should I have tried to handle it differently? I'm struggling to see a way forward from here. Edit, thank you all so much for your responses. I'm really trying to read through them all. Just to answer a few things, well, I have managed the day-to-day activities of the orchard for several years now. My parents still technically own the orchard, but I'm a functional manager. Jake has never managed a business or worked on a farm. He also has a law degree in corporate law. The orchard has made a profit every year for the last 10 years, and we are not in financial trouble. Update 1, guys, it's been 2 months since my last post and so much has happened. I would like to take the opportunity to thank everyone that commented in support and advised me. It really helped me get through some very tough times. First, the good news, my parents have officially changed their will and retirement plan. The orchard passes completely to me now. They have also begun the process of transferring management responsibilities to me now so that the transition will be smoother when the time comes. It's a bittersweet victory, grateful for their trust, but not able to stop himself from thinking that things could have been so much different if only Jake would be true to himself about wanting to be really involved. That brings me to the not-so-good news, Jake has not given up. Literally 1 week after my first post, he brought in a lawyer to the orchard with him. I was in the farm stand when they pulled up, and, well, my heart sank. Tom was with me, and he reached over and squeezed my hand reassuringly before we went out to meet them. Jake and his attorney tried to argue that Jake was entitled to half the business based on some law, kinda obscure, something about inherited family property. He went on to use much legal mumbo-jumbo to describe that, ancestral land rights and presumptive inheritance. At least my parents quickly shot that down too by documentation, showing the orchard had never been inherited, they built it from scratch. Dad even pulled out the original deed of sale from when they bought the raw land back in '83. By the end of the conversation, Jake was furious. He accused us of plotting against him and said we'd regret this. I felt like I was staring at a stranger who wore my brother's face. As the car drove away, I really did find myself wondering what had happened to that boy who used to slip me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking. But that didn't end the matter. Jake began spinning stories around town that I had manipulated our parents and robbed him of his due inheritance. Some people actually believed him, and we lost a few longtime customers at the farm stand. Mrs. Johnson told me she couldn't support a business built on family betrayal. She'd been buying our apples for Sunday pies for over 30 years now. That broke my heart. Knowing this, I took things into my own hands. I called the Valley Gazette, the local newspaper, and went in to interview about the history of the orchard and what plans me and my dad have for the future. Carefully not mentioning the conflict that had developed with Jake, I indicated that I had grown up working there and needed to do all I could to keep my family's heritage alive. But I spoke of how Mom and Dad had taught me everything I know, the sustainable farming practices we use, and our involvement in the community. I talked about the school tours every fall and the donations that we make to the local food bank, and that we have plans of starting an apprenticeship program with young farmers. The article was a hit. We had a lot of community support, and honestly, sales were up. All my fellow local farmers contacted and offered their support. Old Mr. Peterson, the dairy farmer from down the road, brought over a casserole, telling us to keep our chins up. You can't choose your family, he said, but you can choose to do right by the land. And that's what you're doing. But drama never ends. The week before last, my phone rang and it was an email from Sarah, now his ex-wife. She was crying hysterically, claiming that he was harassing her since the divorce. All was left because, apparently, he held her responsible for not getting in line behind his plan to take control of the orchard. She wanted to come to stay with us for some time, feeling that she no longer was safe in the city. Tom and I have decided to let her stay in our guest house. It's a little cottage on the periphery of our orchard that we generally rent to seasonal workers. Sarah arrived late one night, looking utterly exhausted and scared. As I showed her around the cottage, she broke down crying and continuously apologized for Jake's behavior. Again, I hugged her and told her that none of this was her fault. Now she's been in the orchard with us, helping out in all ways, and, frankly, has talent. She told me one day, as we were sorting apples, that she had always liked coming over to the farm. Jake had always discouraged her from spending any time here. He said it was beneath us, she admitted. But I have always been more at ease here than in our upscale apartment in town. Jake got wind of the fact that Sarah was here with me, and the man went crazy. He actually came back to the orchard a second time, screaming and yelling. He even threatened us. He said that he would take us to court and sue us for alienation of love because we turned Sarah against him. We had to call the sheriff in to remove him from the property. And all I could think as the sheriff's car drove away with Jake in the backseat was us kids playing cops and robbers in the orchard. We're in the processes of getting a restraining order on Jake. It's unreal to be filing anything legally against my own flesh and blood, but we need to protect ourselves, Sarah, and the orchard. I am feeling pretty mixed at the moment. I'm even glad that we're able to secure the orchard and that the whole community has our backs. But I'm sad, really, truly sad, and angry for what Jake's become. And deep down inside, part of me still wishes he would snap out of it all the same, but that's not going to happen anytime soon, is it? All I'm thinking about now is the harvest coming up soon, and helping Sarah get back on her feet. The apple orchard was my place of healing, and I hope it can be that for her too. There's something about the rhythm of picking apples, the satisfying weight of a full basket, that helps set things right again. I'll update again if anything major happens. Thanks again for all of your support, Reddit. It means more than you know. Update 2. It's been another 3 months, and boy do I have some surprising news to share. The restraining order on Jake finally went through. He can't come within 500 feet of the orchard, our house, or Sarah. It has granted us some peace to be able to focus on this harvest that has been going on. The day the news came down, I took a walk through the orchard. I touched the rough bark of the trees my parents planted decades ago. It was the first time in months that I could breathe freely. Speaking of harvest, all went extremely well at the orchard this year. Of course, the newspaper article helped. We had record numbers of people coming out to pick for themselves and to see our farm stand. We even needed to get extra help to keep up with demand. Seeing the families out in the orchard, the kids running between the rows of trees, the laughing echoing over the fields, the scene was described as nice. Sarah came into her own here. She worked the farm stand with her very friendly manner and encyclopedic knowledge of all the different kinds of apples. She even started thinking of new recipes for our bakery section, and her apple cinnamon muffins became one of the most favorite pastries we offer. And now the surprising part: last week, Jake emailed me. He emailed me an apology for his behavior and asked if I would meet him so we could talk. At first, I was wary, remembering the pain he had caused. But after talking it over with my parents and Tom, I decided to meet him at a neutral spot in town, a local coffee shop. I hardly recognized Jake when I saw him. The smart, polished lawyer had disappeared, and with him, the good suits. He had dark circles under his eyes now and a slump to his shoulders that made him appear years older than his 35. He started by apologizing again, this time in person. Then he broke down and told me everything. Clearly, Jake got mixed up with some really sketchy investors out of Seattle. It's a matter of making lousy financial decisions and then being under a mountain of debt. They leaned on him to give up some control of the orchard, which they viewed as prime real estate. When Jake's scheme didn't work out, they came for him. He lost his job at the law firm and has been struggling to find work since. I asked him why in the world he didn't come to us in the first place so we could help him. He said he couldn't because he was too proud and ashamed. He had thought that if he could pull off this one big deal, he could solve all his problems and prove to everybody that he was a big success. As Jake spoke, I remembered the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. It was hard putting that image and the man across from me into one, but I could see lost little boy sparkles in his eyes. I said that I appreciated his honesty, but it didn't excuse what he did, I told Jake. The thing is, he said, can't be easily fixed up. He nodded, saying that he didn't want to be forgiven, but he just wanted the both of us to know the full thing. Later that night, I sat down with our parents and told them everything. It was quite a long, tearful discussion. Mum cried about how close Jake and I used to be when we were children. Dad was more skeptical. He thought that maybe Jake was trying to manipulate us again. Still, we gave the benefit of the doubt, if only to want to mend things with Jake. We have resolved to help Jake to pay off his debt, but under very strong conditions. He will go through financial counseling, and he will be required to work on the orchard every weekend for 1 year to compensate us. He is to have absolutely no say in the business decisions, but we're doing it so he has a chance with it to get reconnected with his roots and rebuilding the lost trust. When we told Jake our decision, he started to cry. He hugged each and every one of us, repeated thank you time after time. It was awkward, emotional, but this felt a little step in the right direction to me. Sarah was very hesitant at first, understandable with what the case was like with Jake. But she told me that after a really long talk with her, she was only tentatively hopeful. She's decided she will stay in town and has even started taking classes at the community college in agricultural business. I never thought I'd say this, she told me. But I think I found my calling here on the farm. Me? I'm just trying to put it all in me mind. I'm relieved Jake admitted it, but, on the other hand, he's got me nervous. This is gonna be a long way back for our relationship. One day at a time now, dealing with what I can control, working on the orchard, supporting our family, our community. Last weekend, Jake began to work on the farm for the first time. As he and I pruned the young trees, I explained to him that this would be part of their future shape and how important it was. I remembered how the same thing was when we were little children, when Dad once demonstrated it. For a moment, it seemed that old times had just reinvented themselves again. But then I remembered all that had happened, and I knew things would never be quite the same. Still, as I watched Jake carefully trimming branches, his face screwed up in concentration, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we might grow something new from these old roots. I'll update again, if there's anything major. Thanks for sticking with me, this has been a wild ride. Reddit. Update 3, well, it has been 6 months now since the last time I wrote. I'm happy to say that the situation has finally normalized into the next gear. Jake had been true to his word. He had been turning up to the orchard every weekend, rain or shine, to work off his debt. The first couple of weeks had been really uncomfortable and strained. He had no idea what to do at first, of course, so I had to teach him everything from the get-go. There were moments of frustration on both sides, Jake getting annoyed at his own inexperience and with me, since I had to repeat instructions several times. But soon enough, we found our rhythm again. They say, when Jake concentrates, he learns pretty fast. The confidence would grow, somehow, after every skill he would master. Jim was able to graft his first apple tree a month ago. That look on his face was exactly the same as when we were kids, and he would produce A+ papers to the family. He is no longer the big brother that grew up with me, but piece by piece I am finding remnants of the Jake I once knew, the one that would climb trees with me and have an apple-eating marathon with me. The other day, we sat resting under the shadow of an old Macintosh tree, and he began reminiscing on the time we tried to build a treehouse and ended up with more splinters than planks. We were laughing so much it just hurt our sides, and there, for a minute, it was like these last few years just hadn't taken place. The more surprising development to come out of all this is Jake's newfound interest in the orchard itself. He keeps coming with questions about the various apple varieties, pest control, and even some with suggestions about how to expand our cider production. Obviously, he's been doing some homework on his own. Last week, he had obviously been doing his homework because he presented a thoughtful plan for introducing a new line of organic apple products, and I was impressed. That means he indeed had to listen carefully to all the sustainable farming practices we have in place. Our parents have caught on as well. They are guarded but now allow Jake to sit at some family dinners. Just last week, Dad led Jake on a tour of the new irrigation we put in. I could hear them talking about conservation methods, and it brightened my heart to see them connecting over something so critical to the future of the farm. Sarah is one of the best things that have happened to our operation. Racing to graduation in an agriculture business course, she has been applying her learning to streamline our operation. First, she revolutionized our inventory management system and has some good ideas on how we can increase our web presence. To boot, she and Jake have managed to establish a civil working relationship, which I honestly never thought I would see. There is still tension there, but they both are trying for the orchard and the family. With regard to the orchard itself, we are flourishing. Goodness, we made out like a bandit with all the free publicity from last year's drama. We are a minor local legend at this point. Our farm stand has blossomed into a quaint little country store, and we are selling more than just apples, jams and pies, both home-baked and store-bought, and a new line of hard ciders. Jake's obscure lawyerly expertise even came in handy there, navigating us through all the red tape to get our license to sell alcohol. I've done much soul-searching over the last year and a half. I wouldn't wish this experience on anybody in the world, but I can't help but admit that some good has come out of the tests. Our family bonds have been sorely tried and tested by fire, and they are now stronger than ever. We have all learned some valuable lessons in communication, trust, and the true meaning of honesty. Though Jake has a long way to go before he regains all of our trust, for now, I can be cautiously optimistic about both our future as a family and as a business. Sometimes, I have come to learn that the greatest hardships yield the most unexpected opportunities to grow stronger and reconcile. Thank you, Reddit. You were there through the whole thing, and your support and advice have been invaluable. I hope to never have to post about family drama ever again, but I'm so grateful for this community and the wisdom you have shared. My perfect husband cheated on me for our entire 7-year marriage. When I finally rebuilt my life, he came crawling back, but I had a surprise for him. I never thought I'd be in this situation, but here I am. My name is Allison, 32F, and I've been married to Jake, 34M, for 7 years. We met during our sophomore year of college at a mutual friend's party. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was helping in the kitchen, trying to salvage a batch of burnt cookies, when Jake walked in. He took one look at the smoky mess, laughed, and offered to run to the store for more supplies. We ended up spending the whole night baking and talking, completely forgetting about the party outside. From that night on, we were inseparable. Jake was always the life of the party, charming and outgoing, while I was more reserved. I thought we balanced each other out perfectly. After graduation, we moved in together and started building our life. Jake got a job at a startup tech company, and I began working at a local nonprofit. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. Our life together wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy. We had our share of arguments, usually about Jake's long work hours or my desire to start a family, but we always worked through them. Or so I thought. Last week, I discovered something that shook my world to its core. It was a regular Tuesday evening, and I was tidying up our home office. Jake had been working late nights recently, preparing for a big product launch. I was straightening up his desk when I accidentally knocked over his laptop bag. As I picked it up, a small, leather-bound notebook fell out. I didn't think much of it at first. Jake often jotted down ideas for work, and I assumed it was just another one of his brainstorming journals. But when I opened it to put it back, I froze. Inside were detailed accounts of Jake's encounters with various women, complete with dates, names, and even ratings. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. The dates spanned our entire relationship, even before we got married. There were at least 15 different women listed, some with multiple entries. I recognized a few names, co-workers, friends of friends, even one of my cousins, Megan, who had stayed with us for a week last summer while she was job hunting in the city. I felt like I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. Jake and I had always been honest with each other. We'd even had conversations about fidelity early in our relationship. Jake had been cheated on by his high school girlfriend, and he always said how much it had hurt him. How could he do this to me? I sat there for what felt like hours, reading and rereading the entries. I kept hoping it was some kind of sick joke or a writing exercise gone wrong. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The details were too specific, too personal to be fiction. When Jake came home that night, I confronted him. At first, he tried to play it off as a joke, then as a fantasy journal. But when I started quoting specific entries, his face fell. He admitted to everything. Jake begged me not to leave him. He said he had a problem, that he'd been struggling with sex addiction for years. He talked about how the pressure at work had been getting to him, how he turned to these encounters as a way to cope with stress. He promised to get help, to change. But all I could think about were the years of lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. I packed a bag and left that night. I'm staying with my best friend, Sarah, 31F, who's been incredibly supportive. Sarah and I have been friends since high school. We were roommates in college, and she was my maid of honor at my wedding. She's always been there for me, and I'm grateful for her support now more than ever. Jake's been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between apologies and accusations. He's even shown up at Sarah's place a few times, forcing us to call the police. It's like he's a completely different person from the man I thought I married. I'm lost. I thought I knew Jake better than anyone, but now I feel like I never really knew him at all. How could he do this to me? To us? We were talking about starting a family soon. We had even started setting up a nursery in our spare bedroom. Now, I'm wondering if anything in our relationship was real. I've always been independent, but Jake and I built a life together. We have a house that we bought 2 years ago, a charming craftsman with a big backyard where we talked about our future kids playing. We have joint accounts, mutual friends. The thought of untangling all of that is overwhelming. But staying with him seems impossible. How can I ever trust him again? I haven't told many people yet. I'm embarrassed and ashamed, even though I know I shouldn't be. I keep replaying our entire relationship in my head, wondering if there were signs I missed. Was I just willfully blind? I remember times when Jake would come home late smelling of perfume, claiming he had been at a client dinner. Or the times he'd be overly protective of his phone. But I always trusted him, always gave him the benefit of the doubt. Jake's family has gotten involved now. His sister, Emma, 29F, called me yesterday. Emma and I have always been close, we even started a book club together last year. But now she's trying to convince me that Jake's behavior was just a phase, that all men struggle with fidelity. I was furious. This wasn't a one-time mistake or a moment of weakness. This was years of calculated deception. I'm considering my options now. Part of me wants to just walk away from everything and start fresh somewhere new. Maybe I could take that job offer in Seattle that I turned down last year to stay close to Jake's family. Another part wants to fight for what's mine. After all, I put my career on hold to support Jake's ambitions. When he got the opportunity to join the startup, I was the one who encouraged him to take the risk. I took a lower-paying job closer to home so he could work the long hours needed to get the company off the ground. But mostly, I just feel numb. The future I thought I had, the home, the family, growing old together, it's all gone. Replaced by this horrible reality where the person I trusted most in the world has been lying to me for years. I guess I'm looking for advice, support, or maybe just a place to vent. Has anyone been through something similar? How did you move forward? I feel like my entire future has been erased, and I'm not sure how to start rebuilding. Update 1: It's been 3 months since I discovered Jake's infidelity, and a lot has happened. I wanted to update you all because your support and advice have been invaluable during this difficult time. After my initial post, I decided to take some time for myself. I extended my stay at Sarah's place and took a leave of absence from work. My boss, Karen, 45F, was incredibly understanding. She even shared that she had gone through a similar situation in her first marriage. I needed space to think and process everything without Jake's constant attempts to contact me. During this time, I also sought legal advice. I learned that Jake's infidelity could potentially impact our divorce settlement, especially given the duration and extent of his affairs. My lawyer advised me to gather as much evidence as possible, so I went back to our house when Jake was at work and retrieved the notebook, as well as made copies of relevant emails and text messages I found on our shared computer. Going back to the house was harder than I expected. Everywhere I looked, there were memories. The kitchen where we used to cook Sunday brunches together. The living room where we'd have movie marathons on rainy weekends. Even the garden we had planted together last spring. It all felt tainted now. About a month after I left, Jake's behavior took a turn for the worse. He started spreading rumors among our friends that I had cheated on him, which is why I left. Some people actually believed him, which was incredibly hurtful. Our friend Tom, 33M, who Jake and I had known since college, even called me to ask if it was true. It was a wake-up call about who my real friends were. Jake also drained our joint bank account. Fortunately, I had already moved most of my personal savings to a new account, but it was still a significant financial hit. My lawyer is addressing this in our divorce proceedings. On a more positive note, I've reconnected with my family. I was hesitant to tell them at first, but when I finally opened up to my parents and siblings, their support was overwhelming. My older brother, Mark, 36M, even offered to let me stay with him and his wife in their guest house while I figure things out. I took Mark up on his offer and moved out of Sarah's place last month. It's been good to have family around, especially as I navigate the divorce process. Mark's wife, Lisa, 34F, has been particularly supportive. She went through a divorce herself before meeting Mark, and her insights have been incredibly helpful. Living with Mark and Lisa has also given me a chance to spend more time with my niece, Sophia, 4F. Her innocence and joy have been a bright spot in these dark times. We've been having weekly art nights where we paint and draw together. It's been therapeutic in a way I didn't expect. As for Jake, he's still trying to reconcile. He started attending Sex Addicts Anonymous meetings and keeps telling me how much he's changed. Last week, he sent me a long email detailing all the ways he's working on himself. Part of me wants to believe him, to think that maybe we could work things out. But then I remember the notebook, the years of lies, and I know I can't go back. The divorce proceedings are ongoing. Jake is fighting for a 50-50 split of our assets, despite his infidelity and the fact that I sacrificed my career advancement for his. It's frustrating, but my lawyer assures me we have a strong case. I'm slowly starting to rebuild my life. I've returned to work and even started taking a photography class at the local community center, something I've always wanted to do but never had time for when I was with Jake. It's not easy, and there are still days when I feel overwhelmed by sadness and anger. But I'm taking it one day at a time. Thank you all again for your support. I'll update again when there are significant developments in the divorce proceedings or my personal journey. Update 2. Hello everyone. It's been another 3 months, and I wanted to give you all an update on my situation. The divorce proceedings are still ongoing, but we're making progress. Jake initially tried to drag things out, hoping I'd change my mind, but he's finally accepted that our marriage is over. We're now in the process of dividing our assets. One major development is that I've decided to sell our house. Too many painful memories are associated with it, and I want a fresh start. My lawyer has ensured that I'll get a fair share of the proceeds, considering my contributions to our marriage. It was hard to make this decision. I love that house and all the plans we had for it. But every time I think about moving back, I remember finding that notebook in the office, and I know I can't live there anymore. I'm still living in Mark and Lisa's guest house, but I've started looking for my own place. It's both exciting and terrifying to think about living on my own again after so many years, but I know it's an important step in my healing process. I've been looking at apartments closer to the city, near my work. The idea of a shorter commute and being closer to the vibrant city life is appealing. Work has been a welcome distraction. I've thrown myself into new projects and even received a promotion last month. It feels good to be recognized for my efforts, especially after years of putting my career second to Jake's. My boss, Karen, has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process. She's become something of a mentor to me, helping me navigate office politics and encouraging me to take on more responsibilities. As for Jake, he's still attending his SAW meetings and has started seeing a therapist. Part of me is glad he's getting help, but another part is angry that he didn't do this years ago when it could have made a difference. He's asked to meet and talk things through, but I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe someday, but not now. The photography class I mentioned in my last update has become a real passion. I've made some good friends there, and we often go on weekend photo walks together. It's nice to have a hobby that's just for me. Last week, I submitted some of my photos to a local art fair. I don't expect to win anything, but just putting my work out there feels like a big step. I've also started dating again, very casually. Nothing serious, just coffee or dinner here and there. It's strange to be back in the dating world after so long, but it's helping me rebuild my confidence. Last week, I had dinner with a guy named Alex, 35M, who I met through a mutual friend. It was nice, but I'm not ready for anything serious yet. There have been some tough moments too. Jake's family is still trying to pressure me into reconciliation. His mother called me last week, crying and begging me to give Jake another chance. It was hard, but I stood my ground. I reminded her of all the pain Jake had caused and told her that while I appreciated her concern, my decision was final. Overall, I'm doing better. The pain isn't as raw as it was 6 months ago. I still have moments of anger and sadness, but they're less frequent. I'm learning to trust myself again and to believe that I deserve happiness. Thank you all for your continued support. Your kind words and advice have been a lifeline during this difficult time. I'll update again when the divorce is finalized or if there are any other significant changes. Update 3. Hello everyone. It's been a year since my original post, and I wanted to give you all a final update. The divorce was finalized last month. It was a long and often frustrating process, but it's finally over. In the end, I received a fair settlement, including half of the proceeds from the house sale and a portion of Jake's business assets. It's strange to think that our 7-year marriage has been reduced to a stack of legal documents and a division of property. I've moved into my own apartment. It's smaller than the house Jake and I shared, but it's all mine. I've enjoyed decorating it and making it feel like home. My photography hobby has evolved into a small side business. I do portrait sessions on weekends, and I've even had a few of my landscape photos featured in a local gallery. Last month, I was hired to photograph a friend's wedding. It was challenging but incredibly rewarding. Work continues to go well. I've taken on more responsibilities and am being considered for a management position. It feels good to be valued for my skills and hard work. Karen, my boss, has become a good friend and mentor. We often have lunch together, and she's been instrumental in helping me navigate my career growth. As for Jake, we've had minimal contact since the divorce was finalized. He sent me an email apologizing again for everything and wishing me well. I appreciated the gesture, but I have no desire to maintain a friendship or any kind of relationship with him. I heard through mutual friends that he's still attending his SAW meetings and has started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Part of me is glad he's making positive changes in his life, but I'm focused on my own path now. I've continued dating casually, but I'm in no rush to get into another serious relationship. I'm enjoying my independence and focusing on my personal growth. I've been seeing someone, David, 37M, for a couple of months now. He's kind and understanding about my past, and we're taking things slow. My relationships with friends and family have deepened over this past year. Sarah and I still have our weekly movie nights, and I've become closer to my siblings. Mark and Lisa's guest house became a second home to me during the divorce process, and I'm grateful for their support. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown and healed since that terrible day when I found Jake's notebook. While I wouldn't wish this experience on anyone, I've learned a lot about myself and my resilience. I'm stronger than I ever knew I could be. To anyone going through a similar situation, know that it does get better. It's not easy, and there will be tough days, but you're stronger than you think. Take it one day at a time, surround yourself with supportive people, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Thank you all for being part of my journey. Your support and encouragement have meant more than I can express. This will be my last update. It's time to close this chapter and focus on the future. Wishing you all the best.
I'm married without my family's approval and they tried to ruin my business. Now they're bankrupt and want my help. I am a 32-year-old male whose family owns and operates a chain of restaurants. My grandfather started with a single diner, and it grew over the years into a regional empire. I have always known that I would be part of the family business. My father, Bill, 58M, and my Aunt Ruth, 55F, run the company together. Our family dynamics have never been warm or expressive. Hardly ever, we talked on subjects other than business or grades. I didn't have a lot of friends during that time as I was always too preoccupied with my studies and getting ready to take over the family business one day. I met my wife, Crystal, 30F, in college. She was very outgoing and social, which is just basically the opposite of me. Crystal noticed me in class and took it upon herself to bring me out of my shell. She was my sole friend and she made me social the years I was in college. So it was after graduation that I decided Crystal was the one. So I asked her out, and she claimed she felt the same way towards me too, and that was how we started. I would take her home to meet my family, who, when she was around, seemed to like her. But the moment she left, they would start talking about how she wasn't from a restaurant background and that she didn't meet our standards. I was really angry but chose not to confront them then and there. I whisked Crystal off to her favorite beach for the weekend and then popped the question. She was surprised but said yes happily. I did text my family to tell them that Crystal and I were now engaged, but they didn't say too much, which I took as a good sign. Crystal had always been interested in event planning and had been saving money from part-time jobs during college to start her own business. When she refused, I tried offering her financial support, to which she replied, "It's my project, the only help I want from you is emotional help." My family, however, began to pile on the pressure in regard to the wedding. They wanted it to be a big social bash to make a statement amongst their aristocratic set of friends and associates in business. And when they got the feel that Crystal belonged to a middle-class family, they asked me to persuade her not to mention her family at the reception that they were arranging. I was nauseated by their attitude. Crystal is very family-oriented, and I wouldn't want to crush her world by telling her the truth as to what they originally wanted to take from my family. I told her a white lie, that I wanted to have our wedding somewhere private just for us two. Shocked, she asked about our family's involvement, to which I responded that it had been a huge dream of mine, and the family was okay with it. The following weekend we found ourselves in one of those picturesque mountain resorts, which cater to private weddings, and, in this case, had one scheduled for us. Immediately after, I called my parents. The news had meanwhile spread among my family. They were not particularly happy about it but decided to treat my decision as a planned one so as not to lose face. The day right after our honeymoon, Crystal went to her parents' place for a few days, and I went over to my side of the family's house. Naturally enough, I had to listen to my father and aunt on the topic of getting married without informing them or getting married in their absence. Once again, I had my chance to prove my words correct about speaking ill of Crystal. Well, it appears I had startled them with my frankness and was able to veer into a conversation with them on arranging a Thanksgiving dinner as a replacement for the wedding dinner. But honestly, I didn't want to be in this show at all and just did the whole thing for the sake of it because I know this could be a great networking possibility for Crystal's new business. My mom, Linda, 56F, my aunt Ruth, and my cousin Tyler, 28M, were in charge of planning the event. It was nearing dinner time, and I knew that the time had to come when I should reveal the true mean faces my family made toward Crystal, but she surprised me really. She believed that from the start of the proposal, suspicion grew in her, but she chose to trust me. She said that she did what was coming. The Thanksgiving dinner was mixed. On the good hand, some of the guests were really interested in Crystal's business. On the bad hand, I can just scarcely recall my family talking to us for the night beyond Tyler. No sooner had the guests left, than my father called me into his study. I fully expected to be given some position in the family business now that I was married, as was tradition. But instead, my father said that it was my Aunt Ruth who was going to run the business since she had new ideas, and that I had been too busy with my marriage. I was in shock, and began to tell them the years of work I had put into this position. My father just replied that I was serious about the job, which was evident in the way I had married Crystal without thinking about the family reputation. Then he went on to disparage Crystal's small-time event planner business. My blood boiled, but I couldn't feel the words. I stood up and walked outside for a breath of fresh air, and my mom followed. Crystal had remained in the study and had quite the fight with my father about how they treated family. He laughed in her face and told her she and I could try becoming part of the family once she was on par with them. Crystal was upset, and so we returned to pick me up. We left and drove straight home. The day after, I phoned my father to tell him that nobody talks to my wife like that. He wouldn't talk about it. I left messages with my other family members about what had happened, and only my mother returned my call, pleading with me to calm down. She was the one who said we should move on for our peace of mind, and I went for it. We decided to just settle with our respective jobs because a busy mind preoccupies oneself with things that are genuinely worth our while. For months, my family was distant, and except for my mother calling a few times to know how we were doing, we hardly spoke to each other. During that period, I was helping Crystal with her business network, and her event planning was doing great. She was the talk of the town with the most unusual parties and truly unforgettable events. The speed at which she added customers was nothing short of incredible. In the space of a year, she had been profiled in a local business magazine as one of the rising entrepreneurs to watch. As for me, I decided to strike out on my own and put my limited knowledge of the restaurant industry to work by starting a consulting firm for new restaurateurs. It was hard at first, but with effort, I put my name alongside my own family name and not dependent on it. After not much contact for a year, all of a sudden, my family has started to reach out. I have received several voicemails and even one email sent to Crystal, saying that she missed us a lot and really flattered she could not have lunch to catch up with just Crystal. So we're both just confused and a little bit suspicious about this sudden change in heart after all those months of treating us like crap. I'm on the edge of my seat, curious yet torn between curiosity about what they want and an impulse to protect the peace that Crystal and I have built for ourselves. Part of me wants to hear them out, but a larger part remembers the hurt they caused and doesn't want to risk going through that again. Crystal says she'll support whatever decision I make, but I can tell she's wary too. I don't know what to do next. Should we let them explain their actions or proceed with our lives and move on with them in the past? Advice, appreciated, thank you. Update 1, thanks for the support and advice on my last post, guys. I needed to just reflect on the situation a little, and I wanted to give y'all an update of what's transpired since then. After a lot of deliberations with Crystal, we came to a conclusion that it was safe enough to cautiously answer my family's attempts at making contact. The agreement was we would listen to whatever they had to say, but we would be very careful not to get very involved very rapidly. I called my mom again and asked her outright what the sudden change of heart was all about. She said they missed us and they realized that they had been at fault about the way they had treated all of us, especially Crystal from the start. She said they wanted to make amends and get back to our lives. With all my doubts, considering their past behavior, I pushed for elaboration. That is when the truth came out. Apparently, their restaurant business has been down since the past year. Some of the older investors retracted themselves stating they were not happy with the running and organization of the company. Now they wanted to revive the whole thing by making me join them so that I could save the family business, which also belonged to me or was at least a part of my inheritance now. I was so mad. Here there goes again. Just thinking of themselves and how we may come in handy for them. I told Mom that if this was their real intention for calling, then we were not interested to revive anything. Well, this isn't the end. A few days after this conversation, my cousin Tyler reached out to me in private. He confirmed what Mom had said about their business problems but dropped some details that she had completely omitted. In addition, Tyler said my Aunt Ruth's new ideas blew up in her face. She had been trying to expand the business quickly into new markets and was shooting from the hips without having done the necessary research and creations. Subsequently, a majority of their new locations failed a few months after being launched and, in effect, caused huge financial losses. Tyler also told me that my father and aunt were approaching their circles of business acquaintances, claiming that I was still working with the company as a silent partner. Thus, they were using my name and supposed continued involvement to try and keep investor confidence high. It explained why some of Crystal's clients had been asking lately about my family's restaurants. I was furious after hearing that. Not only because they were trying to push us into helping them, but in doing so, using my name in something I had not consented to, in order to sustain the business that was heading downhill. It was after that incident that Crystal and I finally talked about it. We both thought that, at this point, we had to do something for our reputations and businesses. We consulted a lawyer and were advised to write a formal letter of cease and desist to my family, stopping our name from being used by them in connection with their business. We also prepared a public statement for our professional social media, outlining that neither he nor I had any association with my family's restaurant chain. Again, an unusually hard decision because it meant putting the fracture in my family very public, but important for the protection of our own professional integrity. The fallout from this was huge. My father called me, oscillating between anger and pleading. He said I had betrayed the family, then in the very next breath, he would beg me to consider and come back to help them out. I stood my ground, saying that their actions had consequences and we were merely protecting ourselves. My mother and aunt called, too, trying to lay a big guilt trip on me about family loyalty and how I was ruining my grandfather's legacy. I told them exactly how they were the ones who pushed me away and now face the consequences of their poor decisions. Tyler has been so supportive through all this drama. He has been updating me on what is going on in the family and the business. He even hinted that, in such a case, he might as well leave, too, since he no longer believes in my father's and aunt's management. Crystal and I are barely hanging on. Her event planning business barely managed to stay afloat, and my consulting firm has gotten by with picking up more clients. We both put our minds to work and tried to take care of each other as best as possible. We're also taking other precautions to protect ourselves. We have retained a PR firm for reputational management in case something blows up, and we're doing double and triple diligence on researching potential clients and business partners to ensure that none of them are affiliated in any way with the operations my family has been involved in. It's been really rough these past couple of weeks, but we've been staying strong. Seeing how my family's efforts to reconnect with us were only for personal gain, in a way it did reinforce the determination we already had to have nothing to do with them. Surely, I will keep you posted if it will have developed into something significant already. Thanks to everyone once again for your support and advice. It truly means more than you can believe right this moment. Update 2. It's been a while, almost some months since the last update, and so much has happened. I just wanted to drop in here and let you all know what's been going on. Well, the good news first, Crystal is pregnant. We are absolutely in joy and on our way to parenthood. We came to know this a few weeks back and have been preparing for this new beginning in life. Her event planning business turned out so well that she was able to hire a small team, so she will be able to ease off a little during her pregnancy. My consulting firm is also growing at a steady pace. I started taking a few high-profile clients, which got us noticed very quickly in the industry. It feels great to be successful on your own terms without trading on your family's name. Now for the not-so-good. Although my family has lightened up a lot after the cease and desist letter and public statement that we made, they haven't completely backed down. They are very subtle but real troublemakers. We learned through Tyler that my father and aunt had been spreading rumors in their business circles that Crystal's success is all about connections they provided her. That we have good relations and our public distancing was just for show. This has raised some issues of ambiguity among our clients and business partners. We have had to spend too much time trying to tell others that we are not involved in the business of my family, that Crystal's success is something on her own. To make things worse, my mother came by our house unexpectedly last week. She was obviously emotional and began begging us to help the family. She said that they are on their way to bankruptcy and will probably have to sell some of the original restaurants started by my grandfather. This saddened me a little as those restaurants held all of my childhood memories with them, though I collected myself thinking back at how they treated us and remained tough. I told my mother that I felt sorry for them to have all those problems, but it was all because of what they have done and how they had chosen to handle their business-related issues. We weren't going to risk our financial standings nor reputations to clean up your mess. Crystal, being the more soft-hearted one, suggested that maybe we could say something or offer some advice on how they can make things right without getting too deeply involved. I gave into this as a compromise, thinking it could be enough as it might stop their tries to bring us back down. We met my parents and my aunt at a neutral location, a little coffee shop downtown. Crystal and I presented a few general ideas to them on how they could cut costs, reorganize their business, and possibly save the core of their business. We were very clear in saying that is as far as we were going to be involved and that we were not going to give them any money or have our names on their business. My father and aunt seemed loath to accept that this was all we were willing to do, but my mother did seem much more grateful that at least we were doing something. As we were leaving, she sort of hugged me and whispered an apology for everything that had happened. It was the first genuine moment I'd had with her in years. Afterward, the sense of closure was palpable for Crystal and me. We had done what we could, had drawn lines in the sand. We prayed that was the end of it. But a week later, we received disturbing news from Tyler. My father and aunt took our suggestions and twisted them in their death throes, telling their remaining investors that we were advising them and actually on our way back to take over the company's leadership. They were trying to get someone to give them an emergency infusion of cash. We were shocked and indignant. It seemed that whatever we did, they would be determined to use us for their object, whether it were the truth or not, whether we wished it or not. After much discussion and soul-searching, Crystal and I have made a difficult decision. We are moving. We've just had an amazing opportunity come up that will let both of our businesses expand into a city 3 hours away. It's close enough that we can serve our existing clientele, but far enough away, not that it will stop my family from trying to intrude on our lives even there. But for our peace of mind and the future of our baby that is on the way, it is a necessary step. Tyler gets the message and has assured us of timely information if there should be any important occurrence running the family business. As we prepare for this move and as we prepare for the baby, we are thinking positively about the changes this will bring. Super excited for that difference and raising our kid in surroundings free from the poisonous influence of my relatives. I shall update all of you once we have started staying in our new home. Thanks for all the support which you all are providing in this journey. Update 3. It's been about half a year since my last update. The first and most important one is that Crystal and I have acquired a new little human. We're now the very proud parents of a beautiful baby girl named Sophia, who entered the world 3 months ago. She is absolutely perfect, and becoming her parents means the most wonderful feeling of joy, sleepless nights, and love greater than we ever thought possible. We moved to the new city about a month before Sophia was born. Talk about crazy. Because obviously, too, Crystal was heavily pregnant with all our possessions packed into boxes. We were in that time of rushing ourselves and trying to get everything just right. And the new house is just awesome. Slowly, we are adapting to living in it. Both of our businesses relocated perfectly fine. We have retained most of the clients we had back there and are beginning to form new ones over here. In everything regarding home, it has been pretty quiet since we moved. The distance does help in keeping our boundaries. We had just one big incident that I would like to share with you. A week after Sophia was born, my mother somehow managed to find our new address, actually showing up there unannounced. We believe either because of some well-meaning but misguided distant relative or my brother, who I strongly suspect from the beginning was covertly feeding her information. Walking through the door with gifts in her hands and tears in her eyes, she begged to see her granddaughter. Crystal and I stepped back in shock. After all that occurred, neither of us had said a word to my family about the pregnancy and birth. Crystal, being as sweet as I suppose one can be, agreed to let my mother into her apartment to see Sophia for a moment. On her visit, my mother apologetically kept sorely regretting everything that has happened. She told the family business had finally gone bankrupt, and in the process of losing everything she lost, as she fully realized she has left the hugest part of family, me and children. She said she had left my father as she couldn't bear the toxic environment. I was feeling sorry for her a little, yet telling her definitely that one visit could not indemnify years of wrong treatment. I mentioned that if she really wanted to be in Sophia's life, it would take proving for a while that she had really changed. We agreed to very limited, supervised visits, starting with video calls. Ever since, we have had a few video calls with my mother. She genuinely does seem to have seen the light and wants to be a better person and grandmother. However, we remain skeptical. No visits have been made in person, and we pointedly stated that if she sought to involve us in family issues or business, we would cut off contact again without any further ado. And as for the rest of my family, we have heard through my mother that the situation has got worse. My father and my aunt are both going to be charged with legal cases. Apparently they made these somewhat questionable financial decisions in their desperate attempts to save the business. Tyler left the company and is trying to get a fresh start on his own, just like I did. Crystal and I are both really settling into this new life in Westcliff. Her event planning business is pretty lucrative in this new town. Actually, she has been convinced by some friends to think about writing a book on how to creatively plan events following a budget. My consulting firm is doing well, and I may even hire an associate to help with my workload. I am emotionally stable from top to bottom, mostly in realizing how grateful or appreciative of life I am to have her in my life, through the hustle. More importantly, we are enjoying each second with little Sophia. Watching her grow and discover the world around her is just the most amazing experience. We are determined to make a loving, stable environment for her, free from the kind of family drama I grew up with. We're also making a circle of friends here, who actually feel more like a family than my blood relations ever did. It's good to be surrounded by people who value us for who we are, not because of what we can do for them. It's so, just thinking over it all, what happened in the past couple years left me filled with some sorrow, both at the loss of family relations and happiness, mostly at how Crystal and I stood by, creating a path of life. Some challenges that we meet in life could really have torn us all apart, but in turn, they have only brought us closer. I don't want to predict the future of my family. Perhaps my mother will continue progress in order to benefit from life with us. Probably my father and aunt will get punishment for their deed and realize how bad it was. Or maybe we will live on as we do now, for the most part, separately from them. Despite all, I am in no doubt that Crystal, Sophia, and I will be there for each other. We've become our tiny family unit, built on so much love, respect, and support for one another, if anything. End of line. Thank you to all of you for your support throughout such a long and complicated journey. Advice and encouraging words were received, and worth more than you probably know. So though we might very well not update for a while, do know that we're doing well. It's a happier life than ever.